Good morning, Dawn Bryson here. Today we're going to do a real quick video on how to watercolor flowers. What we're going to need is just a few things. We're going to need Canson watercolor cardstock, and you can use the Tim Holtz Distress watercolor cardstock if you have that on hand. But for today's card, I did use the Canson watercolor cardstock. You're going to need the Zig Clean color real brush. You can use the Artisas if you have those, or whatever medium you happen to have, but for this video I am using the Zig Clean color. And you're going to need waterproof ink. For that I used the VersaFine Clair ink. Unity does sell that. You're going to want to get a refill also because you're going to use it all the time. It's a great ink for sentiments. It's embossable up to 5 minutes, so you have a little working time with it. It's a great ink. The stamps that I used for this card is, of course, Unity, and you can purchase them at unitystampco.com. This one is called I Shall Not Want, and the sentiment that I used is from I Am With You, and it's this sentiment here. It's a large sentiment. When I use corner stamps, I like a really big sentiment, and Unity has fabulous sentiments, and they have really large sentiments. I mean, you can use a small sentiment too, don't get me wrong, but for my personal taste, I like a really big sentiment. All right, so let's get started. So what you're going to do is you're going to start off and go ahead and stamp your image. I'm going to warn you, on watercolor cardstock, it does take a little bit to dry. I used the Heat It tool and I dried it for a few minutes. Sometimes I'll even let it dry overnight. If I'm coloring on Saturday, I'll stamp a couple images on Friday, let them dry overnight. You can also use your embossing tool, but you just want to make sure it's real nice and dry. So what you're going to do is, let me just explain real quick. So for those of you that struggle with flowers, the center of the flower, the bottom of the petals are always a little bit darker. So you're going to work darker and then you're going to get a little bit lighter when you go out. Here's another sample. This one's just a little bit lighter, but it still has a little bit of darkness in the centers at the bottom of the petals. To get those two effects, depending on what you like, one uses more water. So if you want a lighter image, you're going to use more water. If you want a darker image, or if you want part of your image to be darker, you're going to use less water. Now, when using an aqua marker, sometimes they can get a little bit extra wet. So just keep a little towel. I just keep a towel and I just wipe the tip off a little bit. If you feel like it's getting a little too wet, that's just a little tip, something to keep in mind. So I go ahead and I stamped my image on the cardstock, and we're going to use dry. So I'm starting off with a dry piece of paper. Some people do a water wash first to get things moving and a little bit flowing, which is perfectly fine. It's beautiful. But for today, for this technique and what I'm doing, we're going to go ahead and start with dry. I'm just going to color a few petals for you just so you guys can have an idea, and then I'll show you how to do this kind of wash along the outer edge. So let's do a center petal first. Now the center petals are going to be a little bit darker because they're at the center of the flower. So at the base of the petal, the part of the petal that's closest to the center of the flower, you're going to go ahead and make a little line. You're going to go up a little bit, so it's going to be a thicker line. And you're going to go up the whole edge. And then you're going to take, this is like a fine point. So you're going to take that point and you're just going to go up the edge of the petal. And now on this one I did it a little bit thicker because this is a center, and that's it. So you can see I have a little bit thicker here towards the base, or the bottom of the petal, and then a little bit up on the edge. Then you're going to take your aqua marker and you're going to start at the bottom and just little circles, and you're going to get that ink moving. Go all the way across the bottom, and then you're going to start to pull that ink up. Go around the edge, go over the center. Just go over that ink a little bit first before you move it out. And that's it. Now this part of the flower here, this is the part of the flower that's kind of curling over. So I want that to be a little lighter. And what I did is, once you get to that edge, your pen is kind of watered down. Your ink is watered down. So when you go over it, it is a little bit lighter. If it's not light enough for you, go ahead and dip in your water and then go ahead and rinse it off. But you can see there that it's a lot lighter than my center. So for me, that works. Now you can have a cup of water and dip your aqua marker in the cup. I just spray a little bit of water out onto my my glass mat, and I dip my pen in it when I want a little bit more water, and then I'll go ahead and take this and dry it off if I need to. That way, because sometimes when you dip it into a cup, it gets just stopping wet, and I just want a touch of water, so I put a little bit of water on. I just dip that edge into it. All right, so let's do another center flower. We're gonna do the one right next door. So you can see this one's kind of tucked in here at the bottom. So where it's tucked in, I'm gonna do a little line. And I'm doing a little bit of a smaller line on this one because the petal's smaller. And then a real thin line here on the side. And the reason I go up the side is just to give a little bit of definition between the two petals. And then you're gonna go ahead and take your aqua marker again, go along that bottom, get that water moving, and then take it up. Now, on this particular petal, the part that curves around is larger than the inside petal itself. So I'm going to go ahead and just color that up. And it's pretty thin. So if I wanted this a little bit darker, what you can do is go in with your marker, add a little bit more color to the inside. But I will tell you, if your flower is real wet, it's going to rinse the ink off of this. So you just have to wait a second for the ink to come back down. So just kind of be aware of that when you're doing it. I added a little bit more ink. I'm going to move it around the bottom and then take some more over the top. And you can see it kind of gives you those natural shadows. And that's it. So let's do an outside petal. Let's do a petal that's further away. So I'm going to do this petal right here. So this petal is further away, but it has a little bit of it tucked in. So where it's tucked in is I'm going to add a little bit of ink here and here. You see that? And then just go ahead and make your thin line around, and then a real thin line on the edge. This marker will allow you to do super thin lines. And I'm just going to do a little bit up here and a little bit right here. I'm just kind of going over where Gracielle kind of drew her flower petal lines, and I'm just going real thin. And I'm going to go ahead and take my marker again, start where it's most concentrated, little circular motions, kind of go up that side, and then thin it out, brush it over. This is so, I promise you, you guys can do this. It's so much easier than you think. And there you go. That's an outside petal. Now, if I wanted a little bit darker, again, I'm not using much water, so it's not going to rinse my ink off. I can just go ahead, add a little bit more ink. I'm going to dip a teeny bit of that into my marker and then go up. And there you can see it's a little bit darker now. Let's do one more petal. Let's do this one here. So nothing's really tucked in too much. So I'm just going to do a line here, and I'm just going to go a little bit up on the side. Go ahead and get your circles going, and then pull it up. Now, say this is a little darker than I wanted it. How do you fix it? So two ways you can fix it is you can add a little bit more water. Sometimes what you can do is you can take your little towel and just kind of dab it, and that'll take some of the pigment off. So there's two ways you can do it. Just, you have to play. I mean, playing is how you're going to learn. That's how you're going to get better. It's how you're going to kind of figure things out. Super easy. For the center, I didn't even use water. I just went ahead and colored it in because I wanted it to be kind of a bright yellow, and that was it. Now for the edging. I used Distress ink instead of the Zig marker. You can use the Zig marker. You're just going to draw your line around the edge and then feather it out like I do with the Distress ink. So you're going to take your Distress ink, you smush some out onto your card, your mat, or your whatever you're working on, and you're going to go ahead and dip your water in it, and you're going to take and make a line. So this line's going to be a little bit more pigmented because I added no water first. All right, so you can see it's pretty blue. All right, so you can add as much as you want. You can make this line as thick as you want. More water, less color. So I'm going to go in with a good bit of water, and I'm just going to flatten my brush and kind of feather that out. So it's going to be a little darker towards towards the line of the flower, and then it's going to feather it out. If you want this to be a lot more blue, like in this one, you're going to add more ink. On this card, I went ahead and did it a little bit lighter, so I went darker at the edge and then I kind of feathered it out. And that's it. Just to finish assembling your card real quick, you're going to cut it down, mount it onto black. For the gold splatter, I took the Kiritake Gambi. Add a little water to your pan, you mix your brush around, you flick some of the gold on there, add a few gold sequins, and you're done. Now this card does take a few minutes because of the coloring, but it's really not a long process. You can do it. I promise you can do it. Go ahead and share with us what you made over on Unity Show and Tell. I'd love to see it. Tag me. If you have questions, message me. I'd be happy to help you in any way that I can. You guys have a great day. I hope you enjoyed this video. See ya.